June 6, 1944, 12:15 a.m., Strong Point, WN62, Omaha Beach. Private Heinrich Seau carefully wiped down the barrel of his machine gun inside the concrete bunker that faced the sea. In his pocket was a letter from his girlfriend back home, who promised to wait for him until the war was won. The invasion will be their grave. We will push them back into the ocean in a matter of hours. He had written those words to her just 3 days before, after Field Marshal Rommel himself had visited their defenses. The famous commander had looked through Seau's gun sight, checked their fields of fire, and nodded his approval. When they come, Rommel had said, this beach will be their burial ground. Through his scope, Seau saw only a quiet darkness over the water. The night was still, almost peaceful. 12 hours later, this same young soldier would be found sobbing inside his bunker, surrounded by 13,500 spent shell casings, his gun barrel bent from the heat, staring at an invasion so large he could not fully understand what he was seeing. The Atlantic Wall ran 2,400 miles from Norway to Spain. German propaganda called it the strongest defensive line ever built. In Normandy, 58 divisions, some well-trained, some not occupied positions, built with 17 million cubic meters of concrete and 1.2 million tons of steel. Hitler had said it could not be taken. The defenses at Omaha Beach alone seemed to support that claim. Records show that Germans built 8 large bunkers, 35 pillboxes, 4 artillery sites, 18 anti-tank guns, 45 rocket launchers, 85 machine gun posts, and 6 mortar pits. The beach had been turned into a death trap. 3,700 obstacles were placed in the water, including metal gates, crossed steel beams, and wooden posts, many with mines attached. Inland, 6.5 million mines were laid, though Rommel had asked for 60 million. Colonel Ernst Goth, leader of the 916th Grenadier Regiment near Bayer, had added up the firepower in his area. His 4 artillery units could fire 120 shells per minute onto the beach. Together with other units, the Germans could bring heavy fire on any landing, but these numbers assumed they would never run out of shells, an assumption that would soon prove deadly. On June 5, bad weather moved in. A Luftwaffe forecaster in Paris said an invasion in such conditions was not possible. Winds were strong, waves were high, and clouds were low. Using reports from U-boats and weather stations, he told his commanders the weather would stay poor for 2 weeks. Because of this, many senior officers left their posts. Rommel went to Germany for his wife's birthday, taking a pair of grey shoes he had bought in Paris. General Friedrich Dollmann, head of the 7th Army, had his division leaders attend a training exercise in Rennes. Even the Navy's regular channel patrols were called off because of the rough water. This confidence in the weather forecast was Germany's first big mistake. Unknown to the German forecaster, the Allies had weather stations in Greenland and planes over the Atlantic that found a short break in the Stromser, 36-hour window that Group Captain James Stagg identified and General Eisenhower decided to use. At 11:15 p.m. on June 5, radar stations along the Norman coast began picking up strange signals. Their equipment showed large air formations coming from the north, but the operators had seen this before. Fake Allied raids meant to keep the Germans on edge. By 12:30 a.m. on June 6, new reports started coming in that did not fit any pattern. Paratroopers were landing all over Normandy, but the information was chaotic. Some units reported paratroopers to the east, others to the west. Some said they were British, others American. Fake paratroopers with firecrackers, part of Allied deception plans, added to the confusion. Major Hans von Luck, commanding a regiment in the 21st Panzer Division, was one of the first to understand how serious things were. Woken by news of paratroopers near his position, he asked for permission to attack. The answer from headquarters was, "Wait until the situation becomes clear." Von Luck later wrote that he knew then they were lost. The paratroopers were clearly marking the edges of a landing zone. Every minute they waited gave the enemy time to get organized, yet they were frozen by their own chain of command. June 6, 5:30 a.m., as the first light touched the channel, German lookouts began reporting something their training had never covered. Some accounts say a certain observer was among the first to report the fleet, though historians debate this. What is sure is that all across the coast, German soldiers saw a sight they would never forget. From one horizon to the other, the sea was covered with ships, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands. Warships, landing craft, Transport vessels. The ocean looked like a floating city. The invasion fleet had 6,939 vessels in all, 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 support ships, and 864 cargo ships. It was the biggest naval force ever gathered. 4 German troops raised on propaganda about Allied weakness. The sight was crushing. One artillery officer at Wen62, who would die later that day, reportedly told his men, "The whole world is coming for us." At 5:35 a.m., the naval bombing began. Nothing in the experience of the German soldiers, not the Eastern Front, not the heaviest air raids had prepared them for this. The battleship USS Texas fired 255 large shells at Pointe du Hoc in just 34 minutes. Another ship, HMS Warspite, fired more than 300 shells over 2 days. The total firepower from the sea was greater than anything the German army had ever faced. Concrete bunkers made to withstand any attack cracked under the shelling. Men were buried alive, dug out, and buried again. The mental shock was as severe as the physical damage. The forts they had trusted completely were falling apart. As the shelling continued, the Luftwaffe's response showed how desperate things were. A squadron leader received orders to attack the invasion fleet with his full unit. His reply, written in the unit's log, was, "What full unit? I have 2 planes." The Luftwaffe, which had promised to control the skies over any invasion, managed only 319 flights on D-Day, compared to 14,674 Allied flights. According to records, only 2 German planes strafed the beaches that morning, a single, quick pass over Sword Beach before they fled from Allied fighters. This token attack by 2 planes against thousands of ships became a symbol of German weakness. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing craft reached the shore. Heinrich Seau, the machine gunner at WN62, began firing at 6:35 a.m. His spot, mostly untouched by the bombing, had a clear view of Omaha Beach. He later wrote that he fired 13,500 rounds over 9 hours. Though he claimed to have caused very high casualties, historians note that his gun was only one of many deadly points on the beach. What is certain is that his fast-firing weapon played a part in why Omaha became known as Bloody Omaha. The German defenders began to experience what experts now call material shock, a mental collapse caused by facing endless force. No matter how many Allied soldiers fell, more kept coming. For every landing craft destroyed, 3 more took its place. If a machine gun was knocked out, naval guns rained shells on the position until it was silent. By noon, German units began reporting they were almost out of ammunition. Their defense plans had assumed a limited attack. No one had planned for something this huge. Supply records show that positions stocked with 3 days' worth of shells ran out in hours. Artillery units, key to the defense, faced the same problem. Attempts to bring up more shells failed. Every road was under constant air attack. The difference in firepower was stark. German lookouts saw American destroyers fire hundreds of shells at single targets, while German gunners were limited to a few shells per gun by that afternoon. The German tank reserve, the force Rommel said must destroy any invasion on the beach, remained stuck for most of the morning. The 21st Panzer Division, the only armored unit nearby, did not get orders to move until 10 a.m. for hours after the landings started. When they finally attacked around 4:20 p.m., they moved between British parachute landing zones and reached the coast around 7 p.m., the only German tanks to do so that day. But at 9 p.m., they saw Operation Mallard 250 gliders bringing British reinforcements. Thinking this air fleet threatened their sides, they pulled back. The division lost 54 tanks and vehicles that day, about a quarter of its strength. They also faced strange, specialized Allied tanks. They had never seen tanks with flails for clearing mines, flamethrowers, and bridge that seemed from another world. All day, German units dealt with a new threat, large airborne forces behind their lines. British and American paratroopers caused confusion that made them seem far larger than they were. Lieutenant Friedrich von der Heydt, an experienced German paratrooper, was in Normandy during the invasion. His judgment after the war was blunt. The Allied airborne operation was everything ours had never been. Huge, well-planned, and well-supplied. We dropped battalions, they dropped divisions. We got supplies from a few planes. They had endless gliders and transports. The fear of paratroopers everywhere made German units hesitant to move. Some fired at anything that moved, sometimes hitting their own men. The confusion made everything worse. As the day went on, German command fell apart. Allied planes cut communication lines. The French resistance, activated by coded messages on the BBC, cut phone wires and destroyed relay stations. Radio signals were jammed. General Max Pemsel, Chief of Staff of the 7th Army, tried to direct the defense from his headquarters. His diary shows growing anger as he lost contact with frontline units. By midday, whole divisions had gone silent. Local commanders made choices on their own, with no idea what was happening elsewhere. When night fell on June 6th, the surviving German soldiers saw the truth. The mighty Atlantic Wall had been broken in several places. The Luftwaffe was gone from the skies. The German Navy had sunk one destroyer but lost 15 of its own boats and many smaller craft. General Wilhelm Richter, leader of the 716th Division, which faced the British attack, reported division strength at 35%, all coastal positions lost, artillery 90% destroyed, enemy moving inland. The numbers showed a total defeat, despite brave individual actions. In one day, German forces had lost as many men as in a major battle, while the Allies kept landing more troops as if this was only the start. Through the night of June 6th and into June 7th, German units tried to regroup and counterattack. These efforts showed the full scale of Allied control. Every German move was spotted by radar, lit up by flares, and hit by shells from the sea or land. Hans von Luck's unit, finally freed to attack, moved toward Sword Beach in the dark. He later wrote that parachute flares lit up the night like day. Every vehicle, every soldier was visible. Shells came from the sea with perfect aim. We lost half our men without ever seeing an enemy soldier. Meanwhile, Allied reinforcements kept arriving. Artificial harbors were being built. Supply ships sat in orderly rows. The invasion was not just succeeding, it was becoming permanent. As German reinforcements tried to reach Normandy, they found every road, rail line, and bridge under constant attack. Transportation records show that units that should have reached the front in one day sometimes took 2 weeks. The Das Reich SS Panzer Division, stationed near Toulouse, took 17 days to get to Normandy, a trip that should have taken 3. They arrived having lost 30% of their vehicles to air attacks, without yet fighting any ground battles. The mental effect was devastating. If they could not even reach the battle, how could they hope to win it? Allied supply efforts, in contrast, worked with stunning smoothness. Landing ships unloaded whole tank units in hours. Within days, the Allies were landing 15,000 tons of supplies per day, more than the whole German army in Normandy used in a week. By June 12th, German forces in Normandy were near breaking. They had lost 26,000 men, about 2 full divisions. Replacements were few. Meanwhile, Allied numbers grew by the hour. Carrington fell on June 12th, linking Utah and Omaha beaches. The German paratroopers of the 6th Fallschirmjäger Regiment, elite troops who had never before retreated, fell back in disarray. Their commander reported, "My regiment no longer exists as a fighting unit. The survivors are broken in spirit." On June 13th, SS Captain Michael Wittmann scored one of the few German successes in Normandy. In the Battle of Villers-Bocage, he destroyed 13 to 14 tanks, several anti-tank guns, and numerous other vehicles in just 15 minutes. German propaganda used this win to show they could still fight back, but even this victory showed how hopeless their situation was. Wittmann's damaged Tiger tank was hard for the Germans to replace. The British losses were replaced in hours. The skill of individual German soldiers could not beat the math of industrial war. Wittmann, who had 138 confirmed tank kills, was killed on August 8th when his Tiger was destroyed. The debate continues over whether British or Canadian gunners got him. Germany's top tank ace was eliminated by an enemy that could afford to lose 10 tanks for every Tiger. The fall of Cherbourg on June 26th was another mental blow. This major port, fortified over 4 years and held by 21,000 men, was supposed to hold for months. It fell in 5 days of hard fighting. General Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, the garrison commander, had said he would fight to the last bullet. Instead, he surrendered. After the war, he explained that fighting made no sense against an enemy with endless resources, a feeling common among German accounts of Normandy. Operation Cobra, starting July 25th, delivered the final blow. The preparation involved 1,500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers, dropping over 4,100 tons of bombs in a small area. General Fritz Bayerlein, commander of a panzer division, reported, "My division is finished. The effect on the survivors cannot be described. They are not soldiers anymore, they are broken men." The bombing was so intense, it even killed American General Leslie McNair, who was watching from a distance, thought to be safe. If an American general was not safe from his own side's bombs, what hope did German soldiers have? The Falaise Pocket, from August 12th to 21st, became the grave of German forces in Normandy. About 10,000 Germans died there, and 50,000 were captured. More than 300 tanks and 2,500 other vehicles were destroyed. German soldiers trying to escape described scenes of total ruin. Roads were covered with dead horses and burning trucks. Allied planes attacked every 20 minutes. Shells fell without stopping. The destruction was so complete that many soldiers simply surrendered, choosing capture over death. The final numbers from the Normandy campaign tell the story of a total German defeat. German losses from June 6 to August 31st, about 320,000 men, 30,000 killed, 80,000 wounded, 210,000 missing or captured. 2,300 tanks destroyed, nearly all their armor in France. 2,127 aircraft lost. Professional German officers gave the clearest views of the disaster. General Heinrich Seau, who took command after Rommel was wounded, reported, "The enemy's advantage is at least 20-1 in artillery, 10-1 in tanks, and total in the air. He can replace all losses in days. We cannot replace anything." General Hans Speidel Rommel's chief of staff wrote after the war, "Normandy showed that courage alone could not beat industrial power. We faced an enemy who had not just mechanized war, but victory itself." Field Marshal Erwin Rommel left the most powerful statement of the Normandy experience. In his final report to Hitler on July 15th, 2 days before being wounded by an Allied plane, he wrote, "The troops are fighting bravely everywhere, but the uneven battle is coming to an end. The enemy's total advantage in men and equipment is taking effect." The Normandy campaign showed that World War II had become a war of production. German soldiers saw American industrial power that they could not understand. One Ford plant built a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. American factories made 96,000 planes in 1944. Allied forces used more ammunition in one day than Germany made in a month. One American division used more supplies each day than a whole German corps. Hans von Luck, thinking about Normandy after the war, wrote, "We learned that modern war was not about plans or bravery, but about production. The Americans made victory on assembly lines. The German soldiers who lived through Normandy were changed forever. They had seen everything they were taught about war, racial strength, and national purpose proven completely wrong." Heinrich Seau, the machine gunner of Wen 62, was haunted by D-Day for the rest of his life. In his 2005 memoir, he wrote about meeting American veterans. "We all saw we were young men sent into an industrial meat grinder. My 13,500 bullets meant nothing against their endless supply of men and machines." Friedrich von der Heydt, the paratrooper commander, became a professor of law after the war. He wrote, "Normandy taught us that the time of the warrior hero was over. War had become a question of factory output, and we had challenged the world's greatest industrial nation with horses and old dreams." D-Day, from the German side, was more than a military loss. It was the collapse of an ideology. Soldiers who had overrun much of Europe learned that everything they believed about their enemies, their mission, and their strength was completely wrong. They expected to face weak, divided democracies. Instead, they met an alliance that had turned war into a process of overwhelming efficiency. They saw democracy's weapons in action: endless ships, planes, tanks, and supplies coming from factories whose scale they could not grasp. The German defenders of Normandy learned that modern war is won not on the battlefield, but in the factories, not by the bravest soldiers, but by the most productive nations. They saw that the Western Allies had changed warfare into a numbers game where output mattered more than skill. Heinrich Seau began June 6, believing the invasion would be thrown back in hours. He ended it, surrounded by empty shell casings, watching endless waves of new soldiers land on the beach he was supposed to hold. His story captured the larger German tragedy in Normandy: bravery drowned by impossible odds. The beaches of Normandy were more than a battlefield, they were a revelation. German soldiers saw the future of war, and it belonged to the societies that could produce the most and use it best. They brought courage, training, and will to the fight. The Allies brought endless industrial output. Trying to stop the Allied invasion was like trying to hold back the ocean. They fired until their guns broke, fought until they had no bullets left, and watched as the Allies simply brought more of everything. The math of modern war had made their courage pointless. The German soldiers who faced DAD learned history's toughest lesson in the time of industrial war. Countries that could not match their enemy's production were destined to lose, no matter how skilled or brave their soldiers. They began June 6th as warriors of the Third Reich and ended it as witnesses to the arsenal of democracy in all its fearsome power. Their defeat was complete. The invasion they had promised to throw back into the sea had instead washed over them, taking with it the last hopes of a German victory.